We've been talking about John Bunyan and his trial. As I said a couple weeks ago, that there have been someone, unbeknownst to historians for years, was writing down word for word all the trials that were going on in this time period in England. And as they began to look through these papers, they discovered that here was the entire trial, word for word, of John Bunyan and how that happened. And you know, it's history. I find it fascinating because you can see exactly what the judge is saying and what Bunyan's answers are. We all know the story, is that Bunyan refused to be licensed and therefore was thrown in prison. And then, of course, maybe of interest to us is, of course, that, but I mean that we were studying John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, which is just a worldwide popular book, and it has been for 400 years. And so, but it's interesting to see how this all happened and how the courts, as we went to the last 2 weeks, how the court gave him several outs. Several times the court said to him, we're trying to work this out for you. And I'll just go back to what we said last week was, the judge, this is at the end of the trial, the judge says, all right, he's heard all the things that Bunyan says. The judge is just aghast that Bunyan would say that we can worship, that he believes that we can worship, we should be able to worship God as we want to. And the judge says, do you know what kind of world we live in if you had your way? And so, you know, without the Church of England helping you with your religious beliefs. And so, of course, the reason he's in prison or called before the court is because there was a law that said you can't have more than 5 people meet together outside of the English church, outside of the Church of England, and that was illegal. So, of course, that they were trying to discourage, of course, churches other than dissenting churches other than the Church of England meeting together, and that's what he was arrested for. And the judge says, we will release him on the condition that he swears solemnly to discontinue the convening of religious meetings and that he affixes signature to such an oath prior to quitting the courtroom. And the judge dismisses the court. He says, that's all. Next case, please. And Bunyan says, excuse me, sir, may I have another moment of the court's time? And the judge says, yes, but be quick. We got things to do here. And this is what's so interesting in history. And Bunyan says, I cannot do what you ask me, my Lord. I cannot place my signature upon any document which I promise to henceforth not to preach. My calling to preach the gospel is from God, and he alone can make me discontinue what he has appointed me to do. And the judge says, and this is where we stopped last week, I warn you, sir, the court has gone the second mile with you out of concern for your family's difficult straits. Truth be told, what appear the court's concern for your family far exceeds your own. Do you wish to go to prison? And Bunyan says, no, my Lord, few things there are that I could wish less. And the judge says then, and this is what I want to talk about this morning, he says, very well then, Mr. Bunyan, this court will make one further attempt in good faith to accommodate what appears to be strongly held convictions on your part. I would say so. In his compassion and beneficence, our sovereign Charles II has made provision for dissenting preachers to hold some limited meetings. All that is required is that such ministers procure licenses authorizing them to convene these gatherings. The court will not require you to sign any documents, but you will be required only to your verbal commitment to proceed through proper channels to obtain licenses. You will not find the procedure burdensome, and even you, Mr. Bunyan, must surely grant the legitimacy of the state's interest in ensuring that any fool with a Bible does not simply gather a group of people together and begin to preach to them. Imagine the implications were that to happen. Can you comply with this condition, Mr. Bunyan? And before you answer, mark this: should you refuse, the court will have no alternative but to sentence you to a prison term. Think, sir, of your poor wife. Think of your children, and particularly think of your pitiful, sightless little girl. Think of your flock. Who can hear you to their heart's content when you have secured? Think of your flock who can hear you to their heart's content when you have secured your licenses. Think of these things and give us your answer, sir. My Lord, I appreciate the court's efforts to be, as you have put it, accommodating, but again, I must refuse your terms. I must repeat that it is God who constrains me to preach. And no man or company of men may grant or deny me leave to preach. These licenses of which you speak, my Lord, are symbols not of a right, but of a privilege. Now, this is profound, what he's about to say. Implied therein is the principle that a mere man can extend or withhold them to his whim. I speak not of privileges, but of rights. Privileges granted by men may be denied by men. Rights are granted by God and can be legitimately denied by no man. Wow, that's amazing. Think what he just said there. I must therefore refuse to comply. And the judge says, very well, Mr. Bunyan, since you persist in intractability and since you have rejected this court's honest effort at compromise, you leave us no choice but to commit you to Bedford jail for a period of 6 years. If you manage to survive, I should think that your experience will correct your thinking. If you fail to survive, that will be unfortunate. In any event, I strongly suspect that we have heard the last we shall ever hear from Mr. John Bunyan. Now maybe hear the next case. That's the trial. And it took me longer to read it, I think, than it did to have the trial. Couple interesting notes. I think we've heard the last of Mr. John Bunyan. Isn't that interesting? One of the most well-known household names in history, 400 years later. And of course, he would go to prison for 6 years. He would be imprisoned again for another 6. He would be in jail another 12 years total. In that first 6 years, he began. He had a dream, and that's what got him started. He woke up from that dream, and he began to write Pilgrim's Progress, and wrote that, as well as 60 other books, most of which were written while he was in prison. And boy, we just thank the Lord for this, and you can see the pleading of the court and the way they gave him so many outs. And I think that, he might have reasoned that his wife and family, particularly his little girl, Mary, needed him desperately. He might have concluded that he would accomplish more in freedom for the gospel than he could fulfill in a jail cell. And that, I think, is interesting to think about, because God knows, God knew, of course, what was going to happen here, and how that book would be used to lead many thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people to the Lord, and to encourage Christians for these 400 years. But he was steadfast, he was unmovable, and I think of the Hebrew children in Daniel 3, who said, you can throw us in the fiery furnace, sir, but if we die, we die. God may not choose to save us. And that was Bunyan's attitude, I believe. And so I want to thank the Lord for this great man, not just the book he wrote, but his testimony that he leaves for us, and what strong words and what strength we can gain from this. Our day of adversity may be coming, and there may be decisions that we have to make of a similar way. And I just would thank the Lord for the historical reference we have here and what we can learn from that.